Greetings and welcome to the Headhunter Show with me, Laban Cliff, coming to you, of course, from Kofisi Africa, who are partners in this program. We always endeavor to bring you guests and leaders who are thought leaders in their various spaces and to really assist you to get ahead. Today, we'll be talking about issues to do with managing a global workforce, and what better gentleman to get on the show than David Ssegawa, a man who's highly accomplished in his industry, has worked in very many multinational companies, and of course, you'd agree with me, he deserves to be on the Headhunters. Take a look at his profile. Wow, very accomplished if you ask me. David Ssegawa, how do you manage to work for these multinationals, Coca-Cola, Oxfam, just to name but a few, and of course even Unilever as well, and now with Living Goods. How did you get all these jobs?
Well, first of all, great question there, and a pleasure to talk about my profile, but most importantly, the value I've been able to add through that career, which I must say, it's been quite hectic, but very rewarding. Yes, like you said, been in different sectors. FMCGs, I've worked in commercial banking, I've worked in telecommunications, I've worked in development banking and NGOs, like Oxfam. So let me put it this way, I think I've been really driven by how all these organizations, irrespective of the sector, actually have a role to play in transformation of society. I'm always intrigued by what happens at the bottom of the pyramid, and I'm talking about the socioeconomic pyramid. How there is that convergence of interests, the private sector and the developmental sector all realizing that actually they are not necessarily competing on who has most impact in that space, but the fact that, that man or woman who is living on less than $1 a day actually has aspirations, and those aspirations could be dignity, through some social systems that enable them to thrive and grow in whatever perspective they are thinking about it. Or it could as well be the aspiration to consume something which everybody else consumes who has enough money. But hey, in whatever small packet and dose they can get it, they would love to do that. Now, coming back to my profession, I've seen that actually in all these organizations, again, there's one common thread of consistency, that building organizational capabilities which enable the workforce realize what it takes for the organizations to be relevant to society, to the different segments of the socioeconomic pyramid, but especially the bottom of the pyramid. That has always driven me. And with my background as a social worker, ultimately spreading my wings in human capital management, I think I found my spot early enough. Yeah. And I've continued to grow and learn what it takes to really having impact, whether it is the profit story and bottom line or social impact to improve lives. This is where I'm coming from.
And speaking to that, you mentioned about finding your spot, and I was actually say it's, how do you actually find your niche in the industry?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of two things. Of course, we've gone to school and we've grown up in environments, both family and society, which shape our values to the extent that you think, yes, what is great out there, what everybody talks about there is what you should be or try to be part of. But there's also the reality of self-awareness to the extent of discovering your passions and being ready to pursue them to the extent of even disrupting yourself. I've done that several times. I've moved across sectors and people have asked, why did you do that? And they say, because there is something new which I will learn in that other space. And as I learn that something new, I become somebody better and different. And so I think my advice to leaders who want to self-disrupt, continue to be relevant, especially in these VUCA days, is to actually say, what is my true north in terms of those personal values which drive me? Where is my passion? And if I were to disrupt myself, which could be those 2 or 3 pivots I need to make in my career life to actually continue to be relevant and be different. You don't have to be a me too. That's what I think.
And just now shifting gears now, David, it's the concern about how do you actually manage a global workforce? And I think from your experience with all these multinationals, with talent sitting somewhere in South Africa, in Ghana, in the UK, and you sitting there as a people manager, how do you actually handle it?
Well, I think that's part of the fun of playing a global role. First of all, you actually become a convener of multiple cultures all coming together to really deliver value for an organization. Let me put it this way. Laban, I've realized for the last couple of decades that actually there's nothing as beautiful as being able to leverage the collective genius that comes from across the globe. Granted, at times we've been limited by the boundaries, we can't move talent around. But if you have a globally connected workforce, like I've managed over the last decade plus, there is something about figuring out what glues up all these different perspectives, different backgrounds, experiences, but most importantly, even the nuances that relate to different markets. Because there will always be some pockets of excellence in each of these locations. But imagine getting all those global brains to connect to one common agenda, a common purpose. And everybody feels every day when they wake up, they add value to that big picture. And they can actually later on demonstrate to whichever stakeholder they have to talk to how they fit into the big picture. That has always been brilliant. And so from where I sit as a global leader is always figuring out, one, what is that unifying factor in terms of the team's aspirations, and how do that connect to the common purpose? And then position it in such a way that everybody feels they have a role to play. And amazing how actually increasingly, especially Generation Y and Z, are feeling more gratified by being part of a global community. They are global citizens. That's what is in their minds. And they are excited about opportunities like working for a global company.
And then, of course, comes in the issue about these generations in the organizations. I mean, Harvard has had a whole report about, managing Gen Zs and Ys, Gen Zs. It's quite critical for managers to understand this. From your view, in terms of this generational management, issues to do with culture, they also quite play a key role, right?
Yeah, so I think we are now wiser than we were before on those new generations. I call them new, but they're no longer new, to be honest. They're part of us. I think it's common now to have a workforce where you have 4 generations, great-grandpa, grandpa, dad, and son. It is very normal now in most of the organizations we're working in. But here's the thing. I think first we appreciate what their desire, what their aspirations are. And we need to therefore redesign and rethink the workplace to be able to accommodate as many, if not all, the generations. And it's true. We have clarity of what drives each of these generations. But there's also the reality of there is a point of connection, for all of them. And so organizations or high-performance organizations have figured out that the recipe for success in terms of workforce and workplace of the future is really to say, what is the connecting point within the purpose of the organization? And you'll be amazed that Generation Y and Generation Z are really passionate about making a difference in the world, to the extent that they're ready to even to trade off things like salary, which we used to value a lot in our own generations. And they're actually saying, how do I make a difference? In fact, when you're interviewing them and you give them a chance to interview you back, they ask you, so do I have an opportunity to make a difference out there? I remember one employee, a very young one, I just recruited in South Africa, who came to negotiate his contract and asked me, do I have an opportunity to negotiate my hours of work? I said, of course we can talk about that, unusual, but we can. But it boiled down to, he wanted to be given sabbatical leave every year to go and contribute to communities, cleaning the communities. And that is, so we are therefore talking about reinventing and redefining the employee value proposition to make sure that it connects with the body, mind, and souls of everybody in the workplace, irrespective of the generation.
Let's downscale it a bit, so move away from the global side and just look at it regionally. I've been quite keen on the East African community and seeing how the East African presidents are keen on that talent mobility. I mean, you being Uganda and of course working in Kenya, I being Kenya would want to work in Uganda. We're also seeing a lot of interest from Tanzanians, for instance, wanting to work in Rwanda, or Rwandese wanting to work in Tanzania. So advise companies on that regional mobility?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Laban. And I think I've been reflecting on this myself, saying, why are countries still thinking borders when it comes to workforce movement? Let me put it this way. If you think about what has been called the new normal, and it's no longer new, the truth is the boundaries don't matter. Why? Because with the virtual way of working, for example, we realize that we're able to tap into talent pools which are all over the world. I can actually employ somebody who is in Uganda without that individual coming to Kenya, and vice versa. I could employ somebody, who is in China and still have them contribute to whatever agenda I'm driving in Mozambique. I think the point is, when it comes to, for example, regional integration, or if you start thinking about regional blocks as talent pools, I think what we are missing out is to understand that each country may actually have some competitive advantage in terms of specific skill sets. It's amazing, but this is what I realize. Surprise, surprise. You may find that Tanzania may have a talent pool that Kenya doesn't have, or Uganda doesn't have. Imagine if you, therefore, opened up your virtual boundaries and started building a regional talent pool, who one, they could do the work from wherever they're located. But two, as part of developing those talent pools, you build some cross-pollination in, so that whether through secondments, and I've done that a lot in my life, without breaking the bank, you can actually have people move across boundaries to go transfer some experiences or unique skills, but they also in the process learn a few tricks from across. Imagine that kind of workforce and what it does, not just for the country individuals are coming from, but for the region. Because think about it. Knowledge is transferable, and knowledge accompanies products and solutions for the consumer and the customers. But guess what? There is the reality of the consumers also moving across the boundaries. So you must make sure the organizational capabilities follow the consumer and the customer aspirations, which are not limited by boundaries. So I think it's wisening up and being proactive rather than being reactive to the reality which has come to us to say, we're now talking about a global workforce. Boundaries are in the mind.
Thanks, David. I'll want you to pause there. We're taking a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about matters to do with trends in the HR space. Welcome back to The Headhunter. Always a pleasure to have you on board. Thank you for joining us on this show. We continue the discussion with thought leaders in the HR space. In case you missed it, his name is David Ssegawa, an accomplished HR practitioner. Thank you so much for being with us. So, David, if you don't look up at your profile, you definitely will show up as one of the top leaders in HR. And you've seen this profession evolve. Talk about personal management, talk about human capital management, HR management, and who knows, and the many other names that have come up now. So let's look at that, and also the way that HR was thought of as just being the orphan box and how it's evolved to date.
Yeah, it's interesting. Of course, I've watched with keen interest how the profession has evolved. I think I was one of the lucky ones to have worked in a profession which is ended up having multiple names along the way, starting from personnel management, then human resource management. Now we're saying, no, let's talk about people, and then other people are calling it all forms of things, which is okay. But I think for me, it is less about what you call the function. It's about what the function delivers. And I think I've seen three key trends over the last 2 decades, let me put it this way. That yes, like you rightly said, Laban, I think we came from a space where HR, or personnel management as it was called, was the team that hires and fires. Yeah. It was very normal to say, oh, so you're personnel manager, so you're the guy who hires and fires. Yeah. And we used to like that, by the way. It was powerful. But the truth is, I think it included a man that you were a back office function, which was providing some support if you are asked to, otherwise do some basic policeman work of, who has come late, who has made an offense, and take action about it. Yeah. But thank God, I think the universal trend has been that increasingly the leaders of organizations, business leaders for that matter, have realized actually how much organization capability can be built through a strong human resources function. I think part of the conversation has always been, in the profession has always been, we need to get HR, human resources, to the boardroom. And actually that happened over the last 1 year. We saw organizations scrambling to hire top-notch HR directors because they really want to get them into the boardroom. And true, it happened, because it was like, yeah, but think about it, it was tokenism. Because these HR directors will go into the boardroom and listen and watch the action, but actually, there was nothing to show after that meeting. And so, in the last decade, what has happened is, for HR professionals and CEOs start saying, okay, when you're in the boardroom, how do you add value? And now it is evolved to the extent that actually, HR has become not just business partner, as we used to call it, but now is part of the business. Because some of these organizations today, like tech companies, what is the business? The business is the people. It's a people business. Because without people, to look at the big fours, look at consultancy firms, what is business? It's the people. Without the people, you have no consultancy firm. And so I think it was a no-brainer that HR was bound to move in this direction. But I think we've gone now to another level, and a number of organizations, HR professions, are struggling to get there. But I'm glad to say most CEOs are getting it.
In managing this diverse workforce and seeing these trends, I see that the need for leaders is now more critical, more than ever.
So spot on, Laban. Yeah. To the extent that actually, if there was an HR leader who was hiding, behind the walls, they were exposed this time. Because it was all about people, and it wasn't about just connecting the mind of the employees, but their hearts. And this is where we saw, not just as HR leaders, but even organizational leaders, all of them, going through a crash MBA on how to connect with the people with all the highest level of vulnerability, authenticity, and sharpening their listening skills. But who was being at the forefront of rallying leadership around what now mattered, which was keep sanity in the organization, keep people engaged, even when they're working from home. And this is where HR leaders stepped up to actually get into the driver's seat and get everybody to believe that there was hope, that actually you have a workforce for today, but which could also be part of the future, and who will enable the organization to not only survive, but thrive and continue growing. And we're seeing many organizations flourishing, by the way, even after COVID.
One would argue that, challenging the HR professionals is that they just don't come to the table.
So, of course, we've been flooded with all sorts of training courses and motivation speakers in the HR field talking about, HR, you have to be the boardroom. When you're the boardroom, you have to be relevant, speak the business language, etc. It's all nice, but a good part of it has been rhetoric. I think the reality is that whether you like it or not, the business is now asking HR to actually lead on many spheres. The first one is, of course, understanding the global trends. And I think HR has been very positioned to know what's going on out there. And so one of the first pieces of advice to the HR leaders is to be connected with the world, what's happening globally. And by doing the environmental scan of the trends, especially as it relates to consumer and customer trends, and then what does that mean for our culture, then be able to be stewards of the transformations organizations need. As I said, to survive and to thrive. The second thing is really being able to do a diagnostic and internal scrutiny of the capabilities we have today and the capability we need for the future business. And so they are the ones to really steward the conversations around connecting the as is and the to be. And that is a huge conversation, from really thinking about the culture, to think about risk profiling, thinking about actually what kind of upskilling and reskilling of the current workforce we need, thinking about digital transformation to the extent of crowding in opportunities like AI, the bots, robots, chatbots, and all. So literally getting talent to connect with technology.
What's your advice to people managers into how they can be transformational leaders?
So, number one, be connected to the marketplace. Understand what's going on. The consumer, customer, and client needs and aspirations, because that's where it starts and stops. Number two, working backwards into the organizational culture to understand, therefore, how do we do the things we do around here, norms and values and the entire belief system, and then take it into, and therefore, which are the organizational capabilities which we need to harness to be relevant. And that is the domain of human resources. And so thinking, structures, systems, processes, people, and the way we measure success, that is the recipe for success for the HR leaders, being stewards of that space. But last but not least, we've talked about human resources, and we've talked about people management. How do the HR people strengthen the hand of all people, line managers as we call them, business leaders, to understand the people agenda and own it. And then they become the coaches for the people leaders or line managers to work and deliver superior results through people. Last but not least, to really reinvent or even disrupt the legacy HR structures and systems and processes, because a number of them are becoming relevant, especially in the new normal. Totally archaic rewards processes, performance management systems which are legacy but absolutely relevant, not add value to the organization or even the teams we take them through. And so the question is, how do you disrupt your HR thinking to make sure that you reinvent the process and systems to be fit for purpose? And I'm talking about future purpose. That is where they can start.
So, I mean, David, you're a consultant as well. So you're sitting there, and just imagine you speaking to, people managers, and particularly at a very strategic level. Here I'm looking at, say, the board chairman, the CEO levels, and senior managers. What will be your advice to them in this whole people management space?
Yeah, so this is what I would say to the CEOs and those senior line managers. And I would actually say they need to think about the future workforce in a very agile way. What do I mean? We know for sure that probably 40% of the roles or the jobs in most organizations today will not exist in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, the World Economic Forum has published some of these jobs, and it's scary, but that's a reality, Laban. And so you are a CEO, you're a business leader, and you jealously holding on to these jobs in your current structure, and you think you could deliver the future business results and keep ahead of the curve by doing the same tricks, same things with the same workforce of today, chances are you will not survive. And so I would say, one, if you're to think ahead 5 to 10 years, and you think about your organizational strategy and what success will look like in 10 years, you need then to start crowding in those skills and competencies and capabilities right now, because you don't plant the tree when you want to eat the fruit.
David, before I let you go, I'll be quite keen to know what you're reading. You'll tell me about that. But keen interest as well is, on your to-do list, what's really on your radar screen as some of your top 3 concerns of emerging trends in the HR space and what you're looking at?
Yeah. No, I think, first of all, 3 things which are top of my mind. One is the digital disruption. Whether you look at it in terms of a full digital transformation or the need to be responsive to the needs of the market. Now, you can look at it as a problem to solve, but I want to look at it as an opportunity to seize. So that is top of my mind. How do you make it a way of doing business? The second one is the great resignation, or the global attrition, which is caught up with even some of the small countries in the remotest part of the world. war for talent is no longer rhetoric, it's reality. And unless one is proactive about ring fencing your top talent, but also crowding the critical skill sets you need for the future business, that is definitely a challenge for me and for many other HR leaders and business leaders for that matter. But last but not least, is the culture transformation required in almost all these organizations when it comes to matters of diversity, equity, and inclusion. You've heard all these challenges in the US about Black Lives Matter, but even in other parts of the world, the stress, or can I say, the pressures around power distribution between the global north and the global south. These are realities. And therefore, how do we very quickly bring in diversity, equity, and inclusion and build it into organizational cultures and not just bolt it on? Because that's the reality we have to deal with into going to the future. So those three are really top of my mind.
That has been David Ssegawa, of course, just discussing and delving deeper into how to manage a global workforce. You cannot get these guests anywhere else, only on the Headhunter Show. I've been your host, Laban Cliff. Would love to hear from you. Please share your feedback with us on our social media platforms. On behalf of everyone who made this show possible, it's thank you and it's goodbye from Coffee Africa.